Most people respond to rising food prices by clipping coupons, switching brands, and driving to 3 different stores to save 11 cents on a can of tomatoes. A system that demands constant effort for temporary savings, and that fundamental mistake costs them decades of food independence. They spend every week scanning sale flyers, every month absorbing another price hike, and every year watching their grocery bill climb higher, trapped in a cycle of consumption that never builds a permanent asset because they are thinking in terms of one shopping trip, not one generation. This is not budgeting. This is surrender with spreadsheets. A shift from the temporary mindset of chasing grocery deals to the permanent multi-generational thinking of a food forest. Today, I'm going to show you how to build a 3-layer, 7-tree food forest in your backyard. A system that once established will feed you for 20 years with a fraction of the cost of your current grocery dependence. And it is completely immune to tariffs, trade wars, supply chain disruptions, and every other force that is quietly draining your bank account at the checkout line. This is not a theoretical response to an abstract problem. The problem is very real, and it is accelerating. The average American family is now spending over $1,200 more per year on groceries than they were in early 2020. Grocery prices have climbed roughly 29% cumulatively since February 2020, and they are not done climbing. The USDA is projecting food prices to rise another 3.1% in 2026, with some categories like sugar, beef, and fresh produce seeing even steeper increases. Fresh produce prices alone could jump another 8 to 12% by summer because of tariff surcharges on imports from Mexico, which supplies over half of the fresh fruit and nearly 70% of the fresh vegetables consumed in the United States. Let that sink in. Nearly 60% of the fresh fruit Americans eat comes from other countries. Every single one of those supply lines is now a vulnerability. Every tariff, every trade dispute, every diplomatic breakdown between Washington and a fruit-exporting nation translates directly into a higher number on your receipt. You are not buying apples, you are buying exposure to geopolitical risk, and you are paying a premium for the privilege. This is the moment when most people freeze, not from sticker shock, but from helplessness. They stare at their grocery bill, they read another headline about tariffs, and they feel like there is nothing they can do about it. I know that feeling. The first time I planted a bare root tree, a sad-looking stick with a few scraggly roots, into cold February ground, the voice in my head trained by decades of just go to the store convenience was telling me it was pointless, that one tree could not possibly matter against the forces of global trade policy. But I planted it anyway. And that decision is still feeding me today, while every family that waited is still paying whatever the market decides to charge them this week. Every year you wait, every season you hesitate, is a year of production you will never get back. A tree planted this winter will be bearing fruit by year 3. A tree planted next winter will not. That is a year of lost harvest. A year of continued dependence on a food system that is becoming more expensive, more fragile, and more unpredictable by the month. This is not a decision you can put off. It is a window of opportunity that closes with the end of dormancy. This system is built on a simple, powerful principle: vertical stacking. Instead of planting in 2 dimensions like a traditional garden bed, we are going to plant in 3, creating layers of production that occupy the same ground space but different vertical space, just like a natural forest. It consists of 3 layers populated by 7 specific plants established in a successional sequence. First is the canopy layer, the giants of the system, the long-term producers that will form the upper story of your forest. For this, we use 3 trees: apple, pear, and plum, all on semi-dwarf rootstock to keep them manageable. These are the backbone. A single mature semi-dwarf apple tree produces 200 to 450 pounds of fruit per year. At current retail prices for organic apples, that is $300 to $600 worth of fruit from one tree. One tree. And it will produce at that level for 20 to 25 years. Now multiply that by 3 canopy trees. Now add 2 more layers beneath them. Second is the understory layer, the medium-height producers that fill the space below the canopy. Here we use two plants, a dwarf cherry, which stays compact and begins producing early, and a hazel for nuts and structural diversity. The hazel is particularly important in a tariff environment because nut prices are among the most volatile imported food categories. Growing your own removes that variable entirely. Third is the ground layer, the fast-growing early producers that occupy the lowest level. For this, we use two types of soft fruit, currants and gooseberries, which will give you a harvest while the upper layers are still maturing. These are the plants that keep you motivated, the ones that fill your bowl in year 1 and 2, while the canopy trees are quietly building the root systems that will feed you for decades. This 3-layer, 7-tree system is the core of your tariff-proof food forest, a living infrastructure project that turns sunlight into food security for a generation. But this is where most people fail. They hear food forest, and they plant everything at once. A chaotic mix of trees and shrubs crammed into a corner of the yard without understanding the sequence, the timing, and the structure. That is not a food forest. That is a competition for light and water, and it will collapse under its own weight within 5 years. The second mistake is choosing the wrong rootstocks, planting a standard apple tree that wants to be 40 feet tall next to a plum that wants to be 20, creating a battle for light that one will inevitably lose. The third and critical mistake is planting at the wrong time, waiting for the warmth of spring to buy container-grown trees from a garden center instead of planting dormant bare root trees in the cold months of late winter. This system has 3 non-negotiable laws. The first is timing. You must plant bare root trees during their dormant season, which is late winter for most temperate climates. This allows the roots to establish themselves in cold, moist soil before the tree wakes up. A head start that container-grown trees planted in May will never recover from. Bare root trees are also dramatically cheaper, often 1/3 the price of container-grown equivalents, which matters when you are building a system designed to save you money. The second is spacing. You are designing for vertical layers, not horizontal competition. The canopy trees are planted 16 feet apart, creating the main structural frame. The understory and ground layers are strategically placed within that frame to capture sunlight at different levels as it filters down through the system. The third is rootstock. You must use semi-dwarf rootstock for your canopy trees. This is not a suggestion, it is a law. It keeps the upper layer at a manageable 15 to 20 feet, allowing sunlight to reach the layers below. A standard rootstock will create a dense canopy that shades out everything beneath it, killing your lower layers and destroying the entire economic logic of the system. Now, let's build it, phase by phase, year by year. Phase 1 is the establishment of your canopy layer, the backbone of the entire system. In the first weeks of late winter, you will mark the locations for your 3 canopy trees, 1 apple, 1 pear, 1 plum, 16 feet apart in a triangle. You will dig 3 holes, each twice as wide as you imagine the root spread to be. You will put the topsoil in one pile and the subsoil in another. In the bottom of each hole, you will add a layer of stones for drainage and a shovel full of compost, not to feed the tree now, but to feed the soil biology that will feed the tree for years to come. When your bare root semi-dwarf trees arrive, they will look like dead sticks. This is the moment of doubt. This is where you trust the system. You will soak the roots in water for a few hours, then build a small mound of topsoil in the center of each hole and spread the roots over it, making sure the graft union, the knobby part at the base of the trunk, is a solid 4 inches above the final soil level. You will backfill the hole, firming the soil gently, leaving a slight depression to hold water. Then you will water it deeply, not a sprinkle, but a full 5-gallon soaking. Finally, you will mulch heavily with 6 to 8 inches of straw or wood chips, keeping the mulch from touching the trunk. For the rest of year 1, you do almost nothing. You water once a week if it does not rain. You watch. You wait. You are not growing trees. Kids, you are growing a root system, the invisible foundation of your future food security. By the end of year 1, you will have 3 small, healthy trees that have spent a full season building deep, resilient root networks. This is the critical first step that most people rush, and it is the reason their trees fail 2 years later. You are playing the long game. You are building an asset, not just planting a tree. Phase 2, the understory layer, begins in the second year. In the late winter of year 2, you will plant your dwarf cherry and your hazel tree. You will place them in the spaces between your now established canopy trees, about 8 to 10 feet from their trunks. The process is the same. Dig the hole, add compost, plant the bare root tree, water deeply, and mulch. By the summer of year 2, you might see your first handful of fruit from the ground layer you will plant next. In year 3, you might get your first small harvest from the dwarf cherry. You are now seeing the genius of the layered system. Production begins in stages, filling your basket while the larger system matures. This is a critical psychological victory. The early yields from the lower layers provide the motivation to continue. The tangible proof that the system is working long before the canopy trees begin to bear their full crops. Every handful of currants you pick is a handful you did not buy at the store. Every jar of gooseberry jam on your shelf is a jar that no tariff, no trade war, no supply chain disruption can take away from you. Phase 3 is the ground layer, the final piece of the puzzle. In the late winter of year 3, you will plant your currants and gooseberries. These are tough, hardy shrubs that will thrive in the partial shade of the growing trees above them. You will plant them in the gaps, 4 to 6 feet apart, creating a living mulch that suppresses weeds, retains moisture, and most importantly, produces fruit. By the summer of year 3, your ground layer will be in full production. By year 5, your canopy trees will begin to bear their first significant crops. By year 7, you have a fully functional 3-layer food forest. You have transformed a flat 2-dimensional piece of lawn into a 3-dimensional food-producing ecosystem. You have stopped thinking like a consumer and started thinking like an architect of abundance. You have stopped renting your food security from a system that raises the rent every quarter and started owning it outright. Let's talk about the economics, because the economics are what make this system not just a nice idea, but a rational financial decision. A bare root semi-dwarf apple tree costs between $15 and $40. A bare root pear about the same. A plum, $15 to $35. A dwarf cherry, $20 to $40. A hazel, $10 to $25. Currant and gooseberry bushes, $8 to $15 each. Your total investment for all 7 plants, spread across 3 years, is approximately $100 to $250. Now look at what that investment produces once the system matures. A single semi-dwarf apple tree yields 200 to 450 pounds of fruit annually for 20 or more years. A pear tree produces similar yields. A plum tree gives you 100 to 150 pounds. Your dwarf cherry adds 50 to 100 pounds. Your hazel gives you 15 to 25 pounds of nuts. And your currants and gooseberries produce 10 to 15 pounds each per year, starting almost immediately. At current organic retail prices, the combined annual yield of this 7-tree system is worth $800 to $1,500 in fruit and nuts every single year. For 2 decades, that is a total lifetime value of $16,000 to $30,000 from a $200 investment. That is not a return on investment. That is a generational wealth transfer measured in food. And here is what no financial calculator will tell you. That return is inflation-proof. It is tariff-proof. It is supply chain-proof. When the price of imported fruit goes up, the value of the fruit on your tree goes up with it. Your food forest is not just producing food. It is producing a hedge against every economic force that is making food more expensive. While families across the country are absorbing a 25% tariff surcharge on Mexican produce, watching the price of berries climb by double digits, and budgeting an extra $100 a month just to eat the same food they ate last year, you will be walking through your own small forest, picking fruit from every level, paying nothing. The grocery store calls that a price increase. Your food forest calls that a Tuesday in July. Now let's talk about zones, because the most common excuse for inaction is climate. Most people think a food forest is a tropical luxury, something that only works in California or Florida. That is wrong. This system is designed for temperate climates, specifically USDA hardiness zones 5 through 8, which covers the vast majority of the continental United States. The principles are universal, but the specific varieties change with your zone. In Zone 5, you choose a hardier apple variety like Honeycrisp or Liberty, and you might delay planting until the very end of winter. In Zone 8, you could swap the plum for a fig in the understory and plant in the first weeks of the dormant season. In Zone 6 or 7, the standard system works exactly as described. Your specific zone does not determine if you can do this. It only determines which varieties you select. Do not let your climate become an excuse for continued dependence on imported food priced by forces you cannot control. There is another layer to the tariff conversation that most people miss. It is not just the direct tariffs on fruit that affect your grocery bill. Tariffs on steel raise the cost of the tin cans your food is packaged in. Tariffs on aluminum raise the cost of beverage containers. Tariffs on fertilizer and fuel increase the cost of growing, processing, and transporting food at every stage of the industrial supply chain. When you buy a jar of jam from the supermarket, you are paying for the fruit, the sugar, the glass, the lid, the label, the factory, the truck, the fuel, the driver, and the tariff on every single one of those inputs. When you make a jar of jam from your own currants and your own sugar, you are paying for a jar and your time. The economics are not even close. This is what real food security looks like. Not a perfectly stocked pantry of imported products whose prices you cannot predict, but a productive multi-story ecosystem in your own backyard that feeds you regardless of what happens in Washington, Beijing, or Mexico City. It is the difference between being a price taker and a food maker. It is the difference between watching the news about tariffs with anxiety and watching it with indifference, because your breakfast does not depend on trade policy. The person who builds this system is not a gardener. They are a systems thinker, an architect of abundance, a long-term investor in their own family's resilience. They are not looking for a coupon. They are building infrastructure. They are not reacting to the next price hike. They are making themselves immune to all of them. Consider the full picture of what you are building. 24 weeks of harvest between May and October, hundreds of pounds of fresh fruit picked at peak ripeness from your own backyard, jars of jam, bags of frozen berries, boxes of stored apples that feed you through the winter, a hazelnut harvest that replaces imported nuts whose prices swing with every trade negotiation, a currant bush that produces vitamin C-rich fruit that would cost you $8 a pint at a farmer's market if you could even find them. And consider what you are eliminating. The hundreds of plastic clamshells you will no longer bring into your home. The fuel burned to truck Chilean grapes and Mexican strawberries to your local supermarket. The fertilizer runoff from industrial orchards you will no longer be subsidizing with your purchases. The anxiety of opening your grocery app and seeing that the berries you bought last week for $5 now cost $7. This is not a garden you plant. It is an ecosystem you assemble. It is a shift in thinking from the short-term, high-cost world of imported food dependence to the long-term, low-cost world of perennial abundance. This is not a hobby. It is an infrastructure project for your family's future. It is the single most effective thing you can do to insulate yourself from the economic forces that are making food more expensive, more fragile, and more uncertain every year. A $200 investment in 7 bare root trees over 3 years becomes a food-producing asset that yields $800 to $1,500 worth of fresh organic fruit and nuts every single year for 2 decades. No tariff can touch it. No trade war can disrupt it. No supply chain can fail it. It just grows. It just produces. It just feeds you. If you are tired of absorbing price hikes you did not cause, if you are tired of watching trade policy eat into your food budget, if you are ready to stop being a passive consumer of a system that treats your kitchen as a profit center, then plant these 7 trees. Start this winter. Come back in 3 years, not to thank me, but to tell others what you are harvesting from your own tariff-proof food forest while they are still arguing about grocery prices.